Hi, and welcome to part 2 of this tutorial, where I teach you how to make this glowing energy orb in Blender. You can find part 1 in the video linked on the screen right now, or in the description down below. In part 1, we created one orb using geometry nodes, and the other with some simple modeling. We also set up the camera and a background. Now that the modeling is done, we will create an animated energy material. We will animate the orb and then polish our render in Compositing Nodes. Press Z on your keyboard and select Rendered View to see the materials. Right now, we don't have a light in the scene and we have no materials, so let's change that. Press numpad 0 to go to camera view. Then let's add some world lighting first. So go down here and instead of object, select world. This is the current world lighting, and you can change the brightness, color, and strength here. But we want to add what's called an HDRI to light our scene. An HDRI is an image with details that add more realistic lighting than just a flat color. You can download free HDRIs from Polyhaven. I'll link to the one that I'm using in the description below. Once you've downloaded an HDRI to your computer, let's add an environment texture node. So press Shift and A and search for environment. Then drop the node here. Plug this into the color. And now everything turned bright pink. When something turns pink in Blender, it means that Blender is missing input. So click Open and find the HDRI you just downloaded. And now we have some lights and we can see the HDRI in the background. And we also have some nice shadows. If you want, you can hide the HDRI by going to Rendered View. Click on Film and check Transparent. This hides the HDRI without affecting the lighting. Let's add some materials to our objects. So go back here and go back to Object. I'll select the background first. So press New and you can select whatever color you like. I'm going to go for a pink purplish color. And then let's make this metallic and decrease the roughness a bit. You can always go back and adjust that later if you want. Next, we'll select the icosphere. That's the inside orb. Press New, and then turn roughness all the way down. Then we will add a glass effect. So go to Transmissive and turn this all the way up. Lastly, we're going to make this emissive so that it emits some light. I'll choose a color I like. Something between blue and green. If you increase the strength, you get a flat emissive light. But we want to make this more interesting, so we're going to use a noise texture for that. So press Shift and A and search for noise texture. Drop it here and plug the factor into emission strength. And let's just leave a little bit of room here for one more node. If you want to preview the result from the noise node instead of the principal BSDF, make sure to enable the Node Wrangler add-on. If you don't already have it enabled, just go up to Edit, Preferences and Add-ons, and search for Node. And just check the bugs here. You can now close the window and the settings will be saved. Once you have the Node Wrangler enabled, just hold down Ctrl and Shift and click on the noise texture. This will let us preview the node output. Let's increase the scale to something like 9.2. And we can also increase the details to make the lines a bit more wobbly. We'll leave it like that for now, and we can always come back and adjust it more later. To create even more details, let's add another noise texture. So Shift and A and search for noise texture and drop it here. Plug the factor into the vector and go from FBM to hetero terrain. This gives us another pattern. I'll scale this down a bit to around 9 and go back and adjust the first noise texture. I think 12 will do. We will add some more nodes to be able to animate this material. And let's use another feature from the Node Wrangler. Just hold your mouse over the second noise texture and then press Ctrl and T, and the Node Wrangler will add a texture coordinates node and a mapping node. Plug the object into the vector so that it places the texture more evenly around the orb. Let's scale the material down a bit. We want to scale down all 3 values at the same time, so click on the first one, hold down your mouse button and drag across all 3 to select them. Then you can move your mouse to the left to scale them down to around 0.2. To see the final output, click on the principled BSDF while you hold down Ctrl and Shift. We will also add a color ramp to add some more contrast to this material. Press Shift and A, search for a color ramp and drop it between the noise texture and the principled BSDF. The black controls the darker areas and the white controls the blue areas. So we can move these closer to each other to crank up the contrast. And just play around with the settings until you get a result you like. If you want to change the pattern a bit, you can add some distortion to the material by changing the noise texture nodes. And you can also adjust the scale and detail to get different results. Once you're happy with the texture, add a material to the rings. So click on the rings, press New, and make it metallic. I want to go for a gold color, but you can pick any color you want. We could bring the roughness down and leave it like this, but I want to add some details to the metal. So we will use the same setup with noise textures and a color ramp just like before. Do you remember how it's done? If you want, you can pause the video right now and try to set up your own nodes, just like before. But this time, plug the result from the color ramp into the roughness. I will catch up with you once you've plugged in the color ramp. Here's the node setup I ended up using. I will leave the image up here a little bit so you can change some of your settings if you want. Okay, let's continue. I'll move the handles on the color ramp closer together to increase the shininess. As you can see, the black handle controls the shininess, and the white increases the roughness. We will bring these together. But I want to reduce the shininess a little bit, so I will go for a dark gray instead of black. That way we don't have any areas that are 100% reflective. And I also want to change the white to a light gray to avoid any areas that are completely matte. Then I'll pull these handles together to increase the contrast. And here's the result. You can always play around with the settings to get a different result. That's it for the shading, and let's get started on some easy animations. Let's go back to the Layout tab and increase the timeline window a bit by clicking on the line and dragging up. I'll press Z and go to rendered view so that we can see the materials. Then I want to pull in another window. Just hold your mouse over the top right corner of the timeline window and you should see a little plus sign. Then drag this out to the right to create a new window. Then change the window to the shader editor and let's just give them a bit more space. The animation is currently set to 250 frames. I'll change this to 240. You can go for 120 if you want a shorter animation. I'll hide the sidebar by pressing N and zoom in on the mapping node. Select your icosphere, the one with the glowing material. And if you play around with the rotation, the material will move around in the orb. We will use this to animate the material. We'll do that by setting keyframes. Keyframes are points in an animation timeline that define the start and end of a change in an object's properties. For example, position, scale, or opacity. In this case, we want the keyframes to define the rotation of the material. So select the playhead, this little blue guy here, and move him to frame 0 on the timeline. By setting the keyframe to 0 instead of 1, we make sure that the animation is loopable, as frame 0, which won't be a part of the animation, and the last frame are identical. Let's set a keyframe for the set rotation. Make sure the value for the set axis is 0. Hold your mouse over the value by set and press I on your keyboard. And all 3 rotation values should now turn yellow. Yellow means that you've set a keyframe at that frame. So it's currently at frame 0. And if you move the playhead, the rotation value will turn green. Green means that there aren't any keyframes or rotation changes for that frame. Move the playhead to the last frame of your timeline. So in my case, that's 240. And then change the set rotation to 360. This has now turned orange. Orange means that you made a change to the value, but you haven't set a keyframe yet. Hold your mouse over the set value and press I to inset a new keyframe. And this turns yellow. Let's play this animation back and see what we just did. And the material is now spinning around the set axis. You can also animate one of the other values if you want, but do not animate more than 2 axes at the same time, or your animation will look like it's standing still. If you decide to, for example, animate the material on the y-axis as well, you can set the keyframes just like we did for the set value. And if you want it to spin the other way, you just put a minus in front of 360. That will reverse the rotation. That's it for the animation of the material. Next, we'll animate the rings. So select the transformed cube, that's the rings, and here we will animate the whole object instead of the material. I'll increase the size of the timeline to give us some more space. Make sure you have the cube selected and then go into Object Properties over here. To make this a bit more interesting, I want this to spin at a different speed from the inner globe. Move the playhead back to frame 0 and click on this little dot right here. A small diamond will appear on the timeline, marking the keyframe for the Y rotation. Just like before, the value turned yellow, meaning we've set a keyframe. Move the playhead to 240, and as I want this to spin faster, I'll type in 720, which is double the speed of 360. This turned orange, meaning the value has changed, but there is no keyframe at this frame. So click on the dot to set a new keyframe and it will turn yellow. So now the layer is spinning around at twice the speed of the inner orb. But when we play this back, do you notice how the spin starts off a bit slow and then the speed increases? And then it slows down at the end of the animation. This is because of a default setting in Blender. So right-click on the first keyframe and go to where it says Interpolation mode. By default, this is set to Bezier curve, but you should change it to Linear mode, as this means the animation will run at a constant speed. Now the start of the animation has a constant speed, but the sphere still slows down towards the end. So let's change that for the last frame as well. Right-click on the keyframe and choose Linear, and this gives us a smooth, loopable animation. By the way, you can change and save the interpolation mode to linear permanently if you go up to Edit, Preferences, and go to Animation. Here you can change the default interpolation to linear. And then when you close the window, Blender will remember the settings for the future. The final step is rendering and compositing your animation. Just render one of the frames of the animation, it doesn't matter which one. Go up to render and select image and wait for the result. Then go to the compositing tab and press new. Your rendered image should appear in the background. We'll add a few effects to the image just to make the animation pop. Let's make room for some more nodes. So select these and press G and move them out of the way. FYI, if you try to move this point right here without pressing G first, it will just stay in place. I'll move the nodes so that we can see the image better. First, I normally start by adding the chromatic aberration node. Grab it down here and drop it on the line. If I scale this up, you can see the lens distortion effect. But let's dial that way down, as that was way too much. Then press Shift and A and search for glare node. Drop it here and it adds little stars to the bright areas. I will change the quality to high and take down the strength a bit. I will also go to highlight and change the threshold. Right now, there are stars all over the place. A low threshold value will add the effect to more areas. And with a higher threshold, Blender will only add the effect to the brightest areas. I'll also increase the smoothness for a better blend of the streaks. Then I'll change the color and make it blue to match the emission. And I also want to bring the saturation down a little bit. Next, let's add a bloom effect to add some more glow to the lights. It's the same node as the glare effect, but you can just pick bloom instead of glare. Let's change the settings just like with the glare node. So high quality, change the color and then saturation, and bring down the strength. The final node is one that I really like. It's the Tune Image node. You can just select it down here. Just drop it after the bloom node and I will collapse these so that you can see the result a bit better. If we pull the contrast all the way up, it's way too much. But let's just give the image a bit more contrast. And you can play around with all these settings. I just have a word of warning. Don't overdo it. Subtle is the way to go. Well, unless you're creating a thumbnail for YouTube. Once you're happy with the result, you can render the animation, and the effects from the compositing nodes will be applied to every frame of the animation. So you only need to set them up for one frame. Go back to the layout view and go to render properties. We can apply ray tracing to increase the accuracy of indirect lighting. Then go down to color management and change AGX to filmic. And where it says none, change that to high contrast. Now we're ready to render our animation. So go to output settings and you can choose the location for your render here. I normally render my animations as PNGs, but you can change the file type down here. The reason I like to go with PNG is if Blender crashes during the rendering, you won't lose your whole progress. Any frames rendered before the crash will be saved to your computer. Once the rendering is done, I bring the PNGs into After Effects. You can use any video editor for this. Blender even has its own video editor tab. So go up to render, choose render animation, and then you can take a break while Blender does its thing. And that's our glowing energy orb done. Now, if you want to create the other version of the orb, the one that I made in cycles, I have a tutorial of how to make the material for that version. There's a link on screen right now, and there's also a link in the description below. I really challenge you to give the cycles version a try, because creating something on your own using the same methods as from a tutorial helps you solidify what you've just learned. Let me know how you're doing with the challenge in the comments below, and if you have any questions, just let me know. So that's it for this two-part tutorial series. I hope to see you around, so remember to like and subscribe. It really helps my channel. Until next time, bye!